If someone were in a coma in 1995 and woke up today and they ask who's winning the National League East, you'd say the Atlanta Braves. So for them, it would be like they never had been in a coma for 25, 26 years. Here to talk about the Atlanta Braves as they make their run for another National League East title and a spot in the playoffs is someone who's been on this podcast before on several instances, including for the NFL playoff preview and the NBA playoff preview. Braves fan David Kraus. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing pretty good tonight.
Thank you for being on the show. I wanted to ask you, going into this before we go into the questioning, it's got to feel pretty good, especially the Braves. This isn't anything foreign to them leading the National League East.
No, not at all. I had some pretty good expectations for them. And I think that the division itself, the National League East, has been kind of weak for a couple of years now. But, even with the injuries and everything, yeah, it's nice to see Atlanta back in top at this point of the season.
How did you become a Braves fan? I know, especially in enemy territory, especially surrounded by Pirates fans and things like that. How did you become a Braves fan?
Two reasons for that. The first one is, here on the East Coast, the Braves were on TBS quite often, almost more than the Pirates here. It was like the Cubs were on WGN. The Braves were on TBS like every night or multiple times a night. And, so I became accustomed as a 9-10-year-old kid watching all these Braves games on TBS, and I fell in love with the Jones boys. Andrew Jones playing center field, and especially Chipper Jones, third baseman, switch hitter. Yeah, he was just a great fun player to watch. Played third base, was my favorite position, and I liked that he was a switch hitter, and I just loved their pitching staff as well. I thought they had a good bullpen, and then as far as starters go back then, Maddox, Clavin, Smoltz. Didn't get much better than that.
I always think that Steve Avery always got overlooked, especially when you think of those guys. I was like, oh, you got Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, Steve Avery, and then maybe Kent Merker or somebody else who would be the fifth guy. But I always feel like those two were the overlooked ones, Kent Merker and Steve Avery, especially growing up watching the Braves in the 90s on TBS.
I would agree with you, yeah. Well, even if you go late 90s, 99 and the early 2000s, even somebody like a Kevin Millwood, who put up some good numbers, for a couple of years before he was shipped out. But yeah, those are the three big dogs. But yeah, you're right. There are some overlooked players for sure.
Looking back and your recollection as a Braves fan, to you, what stands out as the greatest moment in Braves history in your mind?
Yeah, I would say, I think you started off the show saying 95. I would say, 95, because that's when that World Series was, right when I first got into the sport. And, Andrew Jones was a 21-year-old kid back then. And that's just the memorable moment the most, winning that World Series, beating a pretty good Indians team that was pretty stacked. And then, ultimately going back just to get shut down by the Yankees. But, yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go with, even to this day, 26 years later, with that specific World Series moment for them.
Looking into the season, I know there are expectations, and coming off of last year's playoff, which everybody would say is sort of bizarre world, the shortened season, 16-team playoff. What were the expectations? I know competitive division, at least in prospect, especially looking at the Marlins were young and up and coming and got into the playoffs and got hot. The Nats, while they were a year and a half removed from winning the World Series, they were still a dangerous team. The Phillies, it seems like after ditching Gabe Kapler to go for Girardi, at least there seemed a little competence in the dugout. And then the Mets, new mindset, new ownership, going over Lindner. To you, what were the expectations for the Braves heading into the year?
Yeah, I thought for sure that we win the division pretty easily. Like you were saying, New York just made some moves, but just not quite ready. And, obviously Philly's been so for a couple of years, and the Nationals just depleted their roster with the exception of, Soto. And then, yeah, the Scherzer and Trey Turner trade a while ago was the icing on the cake. But, yeah, I was pretty confident, coming off a 3-1, lead in the NLCS against the Dodgers, that, like I said, I felt like we could probably get back there, this year, assuming everybody was healthy, which obviously ended up not being the case. But, yeah, like I said, I'd easily win the division and, like I said, hopefully get back to the NLCS against, I thought that maybe the Padres, with the moves that they did with, upping the pitching staff and bringing in some guys to help that team as well, could compete with the Dodgers. But yeah, I definitely had high hopes for Atlanta that not necessarily World Series, but like I said, at least in that position to face either the Dodgers or the Padres.
Was there a point that you felt confident that the Braves were making the playoffs? Was there a standout moment this season that's like, okay, the Braves are going for another division title. Go ahead and they wrap their spot up and heading into the playoffs?
Actually, no, quite the contrary. I thought that we would miss the playoffs. Soroka gets hurt the beginning of the season. Charlie Morton's getting lit up. Drew Smiley ends up being a horrible signing, overpaid him. He gets lit up start after start. Max Fried was inconsistent when he was healthy, and he was on and off the injured reserve list. And then obviously Acuna going down was a devastating loss. And then we ended up making a couple deals at the deadline that ended up working out. Bringing Duvall, who now 35 home runs, 102 runs batted in, leads the league. Is starting to get his average up a little bit. Rosario is now healthy, and Solaire's been a good pickup. And even Jock Peterson, who I never really liked, has had some clutch moments as both a hitter and defensive center fielder for Atlanta. So, I thought that they were kind of doomed at a certain point with the injuries and that. But like I said earlier, with the division being so weak, I'm not completely surprised where they are now. But like I said, I with who they have and where they were, it was a tough jam to get out of.
When did you feel the momentum was starting to go in the Braves' favor? Especially, we saw the Mets were holding on to that lead for several months, and then even the Phillies took the lead for a little bit. When did you feel momentum was going in the favor of the Braves?
Actually, probably just about maybe a few weeks ago. I mean, Charlie Morton's been the most consistent starter. Smiley was pitching a little bit better, and Ozzie Albies there got hot, and Freddie also got his average up to 300. So, those guys were starting to catch fire. And like I said, they were just playing good baseball there for a while and beating the teams that they were supposed to beat. I do think they went like 3-8 against the Giants, the Yankees, and the Dodgers. So, there's still that. But like I said, they were beating the teams that they were supposed to beat. So, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I felt pretty confident that, okay, yeah, they're taking care of business, and we'll see what happens here.
For the Braves, who in the National League do you feel like you best match up with in the playoffs? Is it Milwaukee, or is it someone coming out of the West, in your opinion?
Honestly, I think Milwaukee's a good answer. They have elite pitching, but they don't necessarily have the bats. So I think the Braves could compete with them. Although, like I said, Milwaukee's pitching at the starting level is elite as they come. So they could at least easily shut down Atlanta's bats. But I actually think San Francisco, I know San Francisco has been a pleasant surprise, and they have good overall baseball team. Picked up Chris Bryant at the deadline, but I look at their roster and I look at their pitching, and I don't see any superstars. I only have said, Brandon Belt, solid player, been around. Buster Posey, solid old guy, still pretty good as a hitter. They got Kevin Gausman leading the rotation, who, prior to this year has had a pretty awful career. So, yeah, I think that as good of a team as they are and as much of a good season as they had, I think that Atlanta could possibly beat them in a series. Like I said, I like their chance with Milwaukee as well, but I think the Giants would be a better matchup.
Who scares you as a Braves fan in the playoffs? I'm assuming of the team that hasn't been mentioned, I assume it's the Dodgers, but anybody else that scares you, that other wild card, either be it Cincinnati or San Diego or even somebody coming out of the East like Philly or who knows, even the Mets?
Definitely not anybody from the East. I don't think Cincinnati this year. Yeah, Milwaukee with Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta at the top of the rotation, and then you have Devin Williams and Josh Hader at the end. I mean, those are just 5 lights out guys that could, shut down any team. But yeah, I think San Diego just hasn't put it together. Their starting pitching has starting to become vulnerable. Musgrove and Darvish haven't been as good as they were. Snell's now hurt. Machado has been pretty inconsistent. So obviously, yeah, I think the Dodgers are the, you talk about the defending world champions, best team as is, and then you bring in a guy like Trey Turner, and then you bring in 37-year-old Max Scherzer, who was turned out to be unhittable at this point. I don't think he's looking at perhaps his fourth Cy Young award now, and like I said, he's just been unhittable. So Kershaw looks like he's healthy again. So Yeah, I think they're definitely the team to beat in the NL.
Talking about Brian Snitker, unheralded, but a guy who's been a lifer in the Braves organization after taking over for Freddie Gonzalez, which I believe was probably one of the chosen ones for Bobby Cox at the time. Seeing how he's done it, he's racked up a mini Bobby Cox resume with 3 division titles after starting with a couple of struggling seasons. What does it say about the kind of manager Brian Snitker is, especially trying to manage a team like this, especially with the injuries and things like that? I know an old managerial saying is that nobody's going to care about your problems, even if you have them. But to you, what does it say about the kind of manager that Snitker is?
Yeah, I think Snitker's an above average manager. I think he's done well, and he's definitely in the running for manager of the year this year. But yeah, as a Jazz fan in the NBA, I would probably compare him to like a Quinn Snyder, players coach, kind of maybe under the radar compared to some other managers or guys leading the team. But at the same time, I don't know if he's the guy to get over the hump with. I think maybe his window with this unit of Acuna, Alves, and Freeman might be starting to dwindle a little bit. But yeah, like I said, for sure, he's a likable guy, and I've had no problem with him.
Going to the World Series matchup, who do you have coming out of the American League? Who do you have coming out of the National League? Who wins the World Series, and in how many games?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to go Dodgers in the National League, and then the American League is a little bit more interesting. I think that's a little bit more open here. Tampa Bay's had a great year. They're kind of similar to me. In my eyes, they're kind of similar to the Giants on the NL side, where great season, no really star players, especially with Glass now going down now. So you're talking about an elite pitcher who's, going to have Tommy John and, probably out for quite some time. But still, amazing year. They're 12 up on the second place Yankees. So they're a good choice, but I'm actually going to go with the White Sox. I think the Dodgers will beat the White Sox. And the reason I chose the White Sox is, I feel like they're just from top to bottom, they're a very good baseball team. They got the managers. They got, some great pitching. They got Jimenez and Robert, great hitters in the middle of the lineup. Abreu, obviously, having another very solid season at 34 in the middle of the lineup. You got some young hitters. They're good defensively. So, yeah, I'm picking them to come out of the AL. So I'm going to go. Unfortunately, yeah, I think the Dodgers will beat the White Sox in 6 games.
Yeah, and I feel like now lately a lot of people are coming on the White Sox bandwagon as going through a division where everybody is bad, from the Royals to the Indians to the Twins and Detroit as well. I mean, it's interesting to see that. But I really appreciate it, David. Before we wrap this up, do you have any shout outs you want to give to anybody, and how can people reach out to you and talk Braves baseball on social media?
Yeah, I mean, I guess no shout outs. I mean, other than, just thanking you for having me on the show and for having a great program here that, I enjoy. This is the 3rd or 4th time I've been on with you. So it's been a great experience and, enjoyable for me to be on here answering these questions and talking sports. But yeah, I'm available on Facebook. I think it's just David Kraus, or Instagram at Kraus Daddy is my Instagram name. But yeah, I'm always down to talk sports, baseball, football, basketball, wrestling, MMA. I'm in all that stuff.